3, 2, 1, showtime. This is hello everybody. Good morning from a cold and snowy New York. My name is Stefan Schweinfest. I'm the director of the United Nations Statistics Division, and I'm very happy to be here in the box, as we all live in the box these days, with all of you, dedicated people to the topic of household surveys. Friends on the panelists group, and many participants out there. I see almost 100 there, so I really appreciate that you're coming and joining us for this very important topic. This is a side event to the Statistical Commission, and of course, those of you who work with us in the international global community, the Statistical Commission is sort of the heartbeat, the annual meeting of the chief statisticians, and we always have an opportunity to discuss many special topics. And I mean, the topic of household surveys is particularly dear to my heart because it's such a critical tool that is really been for many years the source of information for many of our economic, labor force survey, social, and also environmental data. And this has become even more critically important, of course, when in 2015 we had the Sustainable Development Goals policy agenda, and that I think many of the data that we have right now, we have through surveys. But I mean, surveys were also on the strain right now, especially in this moment of crisis. COVID-19 put an end to face-to-face interviewing in many countries. We ran together with our dear friends with the World Bank, and by the way, just as a little bracket, I mean, the UN and World Bank have a very long history of working closely together on household surveys. When I was a little professional walking into the UN office about 100 years ago, in one corridor there was this National Household Survey Capability Program, which was a very big program, and it was a joint program between the United Nations and the World Bank, and helped many countries, developing countries around the world in the 90s to establish their household survey programs. And I think many of the base methodologies are still from that time. They have been updated and refined, of course, as we all do it. But I think this is, we have a really proud history of cooperation, and I'm very glad to turn over when I'm done to my dear friend and colleague Jero from the World Bank. But we also, with the World Bank, conducted a survey to feel the pulse of countries. What are your real problems in this, in this crisis situation? And of course, data collection through surveys came up very much on top. 90% of NSO, National Statistical Officers, send us distress signals that they had to stop face-to-face interviewing during the peak of the pandemic. I think we had created this wonderful intersecretariat working group on household surveys just a few years ago, and it brings all of our UN partners. Raphael from the ILO is here at the table, and other UN partners together, who people in the UN system and beyond who care about household surveys. And it was good that we had this group at the top level, because they could spring into action, and I'm very grateful. They created a portal, they put out tools, they helped countries with a set of guidance and protocols, how we can do surveys, how surveys have to be modified, can be adjusted to this critical situation. So I wanted to use this opportunity to thank them, because this was a really critically important and very tangible and practical way of helping countries. But now I think today we are coming together to look forward and look at a collective vision. And the title of this event is very ambitious, positioning household surveys for the next decade. So we are trying to move out of the crisis management mode and really trying to put on here a little bit of a more strategic lens. And looking forward and recognizing that there are other data sources, and that there is even a certain degree of competition. I mean, of course, there are the usual censuses and administrative records, but there are other big data, innovative data sources, and so that are being increasingly used. And how can we best position, and I think this is a very important word, household surveys as a backbone of a national data system, recognizing that there are other data sources and other modes of data collection that complement, household surveys. I always like to think of things not as a competition. It's not a football game where one wins and the other loses or something like that. I think the challenge for all of us is to create an architecture where the different data collection modalities actually happily coexist and support each other. And of course, in a moment of fiscal challenges, we also need to look at the cost side and the cost benefit, make the cost benefit argument. So this is really the challenge for today. I think I'm very much looking forward to a very open discussion. We have 6 panelists coming from very different parts of the spectrum, from national statistical offices, academia, development partners, and DHS, certainly specialized in household surveys, and the regional commissions to bring all of these perspectives together and to discuss today. We have a position paper or an outline of a position paper. So we are in the early stages of this. So your inputs and also your questions from the audience, from the over 100 that I see now on the top of my screen, are going to be helpful for us to start this discussion and guide this discussion. So I hope this was helpful to set the frame a little bit, but now I'm handing it over to somebody who certainly knows a lot more about household surveys than I do, because he's the manager of the data production and methods unit and manager of the living standard measurement study in the development data group at the World Bank. So somebody who has been advising us in terms of surveys for many, many years and plays now a leading managerial role, Mr. Gero Carletto, who is also the co-chair of this intersecretariat working group on household surveys, and we could not be in better hands to guide this discussion. So welcome, Gero, and thank you for being our partner, and thank you for leading this event today as a moderator, and I'm happily turning over to you.
Thank you, Stefan. Thanks for the kind words. And good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm Gero Carletto. Stefan, I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing to point out. It was not 100 years. It was only 35 years when we were roaming the halls of the 15th floor of the statistical office. So with at the tail end of the National Household Survey Capability Program. So, and since then, as you say, that we've been collaborating very strongly, and hopefully we shall continue under the Intersecretariat and beyond, because obviously our collaboration goes well beyond the household surveys. So my role today here is of a moderator, so which is never a good idea to give me a role of moderator, because I tend to overrun generally. But my role here is kind of to trying to keep a bit of order in the flow of the presentation, and try to keep time and moderate the discussion first with our esteemed panelist discussant, and then with questions from the floor. So a little bit on the format of the session. So we're gonna have a short 10-minute presentation from Talib Kilic from the World Bank, and Howie Chen from the Intersecretariat Working Group, who will present very briefly the outline that it's in front of you. And then we will invite the discussant to react to the paper. So kind of to provide some input specifically on the paper and their views on the ambition of the paper. As Stefan said, it is an ambitious agenda. So I think it would be useful to kind of size it also, the type of ambition that we want to pursue as part of the group and as a group with you all. And then I will open the floor for questions and for a Q&A. So very quickly on housekeeping rules, please keep muted if you're not speaking. So also turn off the video, so it kind of helps with the bandwidth. If you have any questions from anybody who has any question, please type it on the chat box, both on WebEx or on YouTube. We're tracking your questions, so we can convey some of your questions to either the panelists or the presenters, and then we might follow up with you afterward if there is any question that requires a follow up. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Talib Kilic, who is a senior economist in the Development Data Group at the World Bank, and Howie Chen, who is the coordinator of the Intersecretariat Working Group. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Jero, very much. Pleased to be with you today, and thanks a lot for joining. I'll be sharing this presentation with Howie Chen, and pleased to share with you the annotated outline for the Intersecretariat Working Group paper on positioning household surveys for the next decade. A bit of background underlying this particular paper. Obviously, household surveys are one of the most important innovations in social sciences, and they provide critical data for social and economic statistics, and also for research that ultimately informs design and evaluation of public policies. Despite their value for development, weaknesses persist in several aspects of household survey data production, particularly in low-income countries that stand to benefit most from survey data. Besides these weaknesses, we see concerns around diminishing response rates with increasing urbanization. Coordination failures are common in overburdened statistical systems that have increased their reliance on surveys. And there are also legitimate concerns about lengthy interviews and the resultant respondent fatigue and potential implications for data quality. And all of this, as Stefan has mentioned, is against a very crowded backdrop of competing data sources and methods that are eyeing to fill gaps with greater accuracy, timeliness, and precision vis-a-vis household surveys. So against this background, through this paper, the Intersecretariat Working Group aims to identify priority areas for improvement and the required enabling environment for household surveys, not only to fulfill their traditional roles, but also to meet new data demands and ultimately increase their policy and research impact the remaining decade for the Sustainable Development Goals. So in reimagining household surveys for the next decade ahead of us, in the annotated outline, we proposed work in 4 priority areas for improvement. In the following slides, we're going to go through some of the early recommendations that we put down in each of these 4 areas of work. So first is increasing the relevance and use of household survey data for policymaking and research. First, we have to recognize the importance of aligning survey design with policy needs at the country level, at the international level, and importantly, also improving coordination regarding technical and financial assistance to household survey programs. Second, we cannot overemphasize the role that systematic engagement with policymakers and stakeholders plays in securing ownership of and demand for household survey data, and that engagement has to span all facets of survey design, implementation, and dissemination. Third, household surveys should be more sensitive to SDG data disaggregation needs. The questionnaire and the sampling design should allow data production on vulnerable groups. The momentum behind improvements in individual disaggregated survey data should be sustained, and ensuring seamless integration with surveys and geospatial data would help efforts to combine these sources to produce predictions of development outcomes with higher spatial and temporal resolution. And ultimately, survey data are valuable to the extent that they're accessible and documented for use. So we draw attention to the need of increasing the availability of de-identified, strictly private, fully documented public use data sets, focusing on regions with ultimately more strict data access restrictions. Pursuing an ambitious agenda on the adoption of innovative methods is the second technical area. As we reimagine the household surveys for the next decade. So as I mentioned previously, also linked to the SDG disaggregation needs to improve the coverage of vulnerable groups, but also to increase the efficiency of survey data production, which ultimately has cost effectiveness implications. Modern sampling techniques has to be in the toolkit of national statistical agencies. In the annotated outline, we list a number of areas that could be considered as we think about how to build capacity at the country level. To respond concerns around lengthy survey interviews, more disciplined and cost-effective approaches to questionnaire and survey design should be considered. And these should be in view of, again, national policy priorities, existing data, and the capacity to implement mixed mode surveys. Third, we've seen, particularly over the last decade, scalable technologies permit direct measurement of development outcomes, and they help eliminate a systematic measurement error in survey data. Some of the examples include GPS-based measurement of plot areas, crop cutting for crop yield estimation, DNA fingerprinting for crop variety identification, accelerometers for physical activity tracking. So ultimately, if implemented in a subsample, these predicted estimates for these outcomes can also be derived for the non-measured sample through within survey imputation. As such, we can achieve these gains in accuracy in a cost-effective way. And finally, we under this bucket of work, we point out the need to improve efficiency of data processing, as that is a resource-intensive and error-prone of the survey data production cycle. Third technical area for improvement for the next decade is investing in capacity in CAPI, phone, web, and mixed mode surveys. Here, we're proposing household surveys to collect systematically information on phone numbers and email addresses for household survey respondents that allow us to build sampling frames for the downstream phone and web surveys, as we've done in the context of particularly the phone surveys implemented during COVID-19. These should be complemented with phone and web survey tools and protocols for use as part of deliberate routine survey systems that incorporate phone and web surveys as part of face-to-face household survey data operations, but also in response to shocks and rapid assessment needs. As such, we can mobilize quickly and hit the road. Third, with increasing use of CAPI, CATI, and CAVI survey modes, more data are now being collected on software platforms as byproducts of the data collection process. So we've seen research has shown that these data are useful for monitoring data quality throughout the survey fieldwork, but also assessing measurement errors exposed. And NSO capacity should be ultimately built to manage large volumes of paradata and analyze it as part of survey implementation. And finally, we are pointing out the need to conduct more systematic analysis of mode effects as we transition to more mixed mode surveying, such that we can understand the relative accuracy and reliability of phone and web surveys vis-a-vis face-to-face counterparts. And these are best done in the context of randomized survey experiments that vary mode of interviewing across different samples of households. Finally, improving the interoperability of household surveys with other data sources is the fourth technical area of improvement. As we reimagine household surveys for the next decade, we're putting forth several ideas for discussion, including a systematic approach to having common questions across a system of surveys as well as censuses to enable survey-to-survey imputation and survey-to-census imputation with ease, to be able to fill data gaps, also to respond to data disaggregation needs. This is not a new idea, just call for a more systematic approach to enable these activities. A similar idea is including common questions in probabilistic samples and other non-probabilistic efforts for data collection, including citizen-generated data, such that we can validate and calibrate the estimates based on non-probabilistic samples. We're calling for systematically georeferencing household plot and community locations in household surveys, again, depending on the focus of the effort and sampling unit, ultimately to enable linkages with geospatial data, and ultimately to enable these cutting-edge applications that combine survey data and satellite and Earth observation data to predict high-resolution, to create high-resolution mapping of development outcomes. And finally, linked to that particular area, but also other types of data integration that has household surveys at their core. We're calling for investments in both research and development of analytical methods and guidelines, specifically on integration of surveys with alternative data sources, which ultimately need to be topic specific. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Howie, who will talk a bit about the components of the enabling environment for these recommendations to take root. Howie?
Thank you so much, Talib. So, oh, okay. Let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Is it on presenters mode?
No, not yet. If you can please put on presenter mode, or if not, just not this one, but that's okay. I think that it's only a couple of slides. You can go ahead with.
Okay. Yes. So hello everyone. Welcome. Thank you. Following in Talib's presentation, I'm going to cover the part on fostering a stronger enabling environment for household surveys. So how do we make everything that Talib had talked about happen? There are a number of prerequisites. So I'm going to cover the key aspects under these. And these are really prerequisites for both national and international level. And they are closely linked to the work of intersecretariat working groups, which I'll be covering the last slide. First, we will still need to intensify and really do a better job in communicate the value of household surveys with better data visualization and data communication skills. And second, data integration is really great, and also for household surveys so important, you've heard. But we do need a strong legal backing. We need to have access to the data that household survey is going to be integrated with, and also while keeping the confidentiality of individual level data. ICT infrastructure, Stefan had mentioned about the UNSD, the World Bank survey with the national statistical offices. So ICT, the lack of ICT infrastructure during the COVID has been very serious, and among which the items that are relevant or related to household surveys, for example, the cloud computing capacities, and that's related to data storage and data transfer, and also how to really provide training, remote training effectively. That's also one of the aspects. And then we've seen that many countries have started using CAPI, CADI, and CAWI, and then there's really a serious need for IT infrastructure investment to make that happen. Yes, we need to move towards a more diverse skill mix at the national statistical offices. And in addition to the trainings we've been providing on sampling methods and data analysis, data dissemination, and then there are a lot of new innovative approaches, or have a better understanding of alternative method, data sources, how to do data integration, and data dissemination, data visualization, and communication. We also need to invest in capacity for remote technical assistance. We've seen this a lot of challenges during the COVID period. Can we invest in the capacity in this area? Can we try building regional training centers? Can we provide guidance on how to effectively conduct remote technical assistance? And then another aspect that's really important is really to pursue a coordinated and systematic approach to supporting national statistics. So at the national level, household survey is an integral part of the entire data ecosystem. So we need to support household surveys in a systematic manner where we're considering support for the entire data system. At the international level, all of us, our group, and all the partners need to come together and work together to support countries. And I hope the Intersecretariat Working Group can be a great forum for that coordination and collaboration. Lastly, financing. We need finance to support household survey programs at national statistical office within countries, but also at the international level, we need support, sustainable support to support the, for example, research survey methods, testing these new innovative methods, and make sure those methods are scalable in countries, and also providing guidance and provide trainings on these innovative methods. Now I'm going to move to the role of Intersecretariat Working Group on Household Surveys. So our group has three main objectives from the beginning when it was created, established. Coordination. We're there to foster coordination at both national and international level in terms of planning, financing, and implementation. We'll collaborate with all partners, national statistical offices, and civil society organizations, academia, and all other stakeholders. And we would like to serve as an intermediary we are there to bring innovation and to meet the national data needs. And we also curate and disseminate best practices as a platform. The second is really to foster methodological development. We will encourage and support experimentation with innovative methods, and also to support the scaling up of these methods that will be useful for our countries. And we will formulate guidelines on selected topics anchored in experimentation and also empirical evidence. The third objective is really we are there to promote the importance and advocate for the importance of household surveys, advocate for better financing of household survey programs, and promote the documentation and exchange of good national experiences. With all the three objectives, we strongly believe that our group's priority should be set by, guided by our national statistics office, by our countries, by our stakeholders and countries. So this is my last slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Howie. So it's evident in the presentation and for the people who read the outline. So many of the the recommendation, many of the suggestions, many of the areas covered in the paper. I mean, for people engaged in household surveys, it's nothing new, right? But there is also a lot of new areas and new ideas. And the challenge here is to trying to see how we can keep the momentum, we can rally support to advance a robust innovation agenda for household surveys. Like as I was hinting before, I've been in this business for a few years. Like then, so we Stefan, we were joking whether if it was 30 or 100. But I see that there is a lot of progress that been made in household survey. There's a lot of innovation that's been happening in household surveys. The surveys that we do today, they're not the surveys that we used to do 20 years ago. So, and this process, the challenge here is like how we maintain this process of innovation. And to me, the new environment, the new landscape provides a lot of opportunities to accelerate this improvement. And the challenge here, and this is what this document trying to highlight, is like how we as a group we can define, or at least we can outline and share a vision to be able to push this agenda and continue pushing this agenda. So I will stop there. We have a fantastic set list of panelists, discussants, coming from different institutions, different perspectives. So very briefly, I will introduce everyone, but then we'll go in the order that I will be introducing the panelists. So we're hoping to really take advantage of your extensive knowledge and expertise in this area, to give the Intersecretariat some good pointers on the merit of having a document like that, or producing a document like that, but also insights and input on how to make sure that it's a comprehensive and useful document. So without further ado, the first discussant is Ola Awad. Hi, Ola. Good to see you.
Hello.
Ola Awad is the president of the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, and will be part of a set of point of views from statistical agencies. The second discussor will be Jack Gambino, who is the former director of the Household Survey Methods Division at Statistics Canada. And finally, in terms of statistical agencies, so we have Mr. James Mwonga, an old friend who is now director for professional service and project management, but I've known him in his previous life as a director of socioeconomic surveys at the Uganda Bureau of Statistics. And then the three presentations from stat offices will be followed by my dear friend Sunita Kishore, the director of the DHS, the Demographic and Health Survey, Professor Frauke Kreuter from the University of Munich and the University of Maryland, and the director or former director of the Joint Program on Survey Methods. So correct me if I'm wrong, Frauke. I did not check your latest title. And finally, Mr. Andre Gutierrez, which is a regional advisor on social statistics from a UN ECLAC, the Regional Commission for Latin America. So as you can see, we have a very different perspective, different views. So we're hoping to make the best out of your knowledge and expertise to improve the outline. So Ola, I will start with you. So you have been a very active advocate for household surveys in the Statistical Commission, in your current and past roles. So from a perspective of a statistical office, and from your perspective as an active member of the commission, so I just want to hear your reaction on the paper and how to make it most useful for a country like yours, but also for a statistical community? How do we communicate? How do we have an impact within the broader statistical community and at the commission with a paper like this? So Ola, just if I might ask, I know that you will have a lot to share. So if you can keep your initial comment to 5-7 minutes, and then we can come back with more questions. Thank you, Ola.
Thank you so much, and I'm really very much pleased to be a part of this important webinar on the household. Yes, I'm very much, see the importance of the household survey from my nature of work as a chief statistician. It's been now a year since the last commission that we had this high-level seminar on the household, and there was such a learning, a great learning process within the past year, and it was also an added value when actually we were hit with the COVID-19 pandemic. As it has been presented, the most important thing is that we have three important complementary of three important issues when we talk about coordination, the development of the methodology, and the promotion and the communication. And even I've seen one of the questions from the participants about how we suggest to tackle, the issue of promoting the data, because whatever we do, if we can't, promote the data and increase the use of data, there's no need for all the work that we're doing. Since we came from the last commission in March, immediately the COVID-19 pandemic has started worldwide. It was with a few countries, and then it has been spread dramatically all over the world. And it was such an important how we were able to use modern technology in data collection well before the spread of the pandemic, and it became such crucial to do that during the pandemic. CAPI was used in data collection during most of the household surveys, also within the population censuses too. And this happened actually with the learning exchanges between countries and between sisters organizations. And that's why what I'm saying, how much important the coordination is. From the beginning, we worked on varying data sources through cooperation, on understanding the data sources and how we can increase the use of admin data, how we can develop and use the big data, which was for us as national statistical offices from the beginning as something as a taboo to us. But now it's been increasing how much it is important. In cooperation with our international organizations, we were able to develop the methodologies, the household methodologies. And I may say, as you mentioned, that I don't have enough time, I may say that we succeeded during the COVID-19 pandemic, to conduct the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the household, with a great coordination with the UNSD and with the World Bank. We were able to develop the methodologies of the indices, especially the changes were dramatically very sensitive during the pandemic, not only not on monthly basis as we used to do. So we became doing it electronically on weekly basis in order to bring such kind of, really reliable data and timely data. I may say the poverty atlas that we have actually also developed from the censuses it was such of a huge important, where we connected with the household expenditure and consumption survey with the census data, where we were able to interconnect to reveal such kind of poverty rates at the residential complex. So it's really important what I'm saying, that how much important to the coordination part, developing the methodology, the promotion, and the communication, which actually we as National Statistical Organization, we didn't focus a lot. Now it became a real issue and so much important. So what I'm saying, it's important to focus on that and how we can interconnect between the administrative data within the household surveys and within the already available data that we have. It's important to also to focus on the priorities on the local level and on the regional also level and worldwide. It is important to learn on the developed methodologies and the new ideas that is coming now in a very fast track. It's important to encourage really the exchange of experiences. I may say, I mean, it was such a useful way of how we exchange experiences between sisters organizations within the different household surveys. So it is really crucial how we can actually learn from the creative of each other on the development of the methodologies and tools. So this is really important. I may stress on the point also, it's important to spread the communication and the partners and stakeholders, and not limited only to very specific stakeholders. It has to be really very much involved with the civil organizations, with the private sectors, with the academia, and not only to line ministries and government institutions as we used before. So I can summarize my intervention. There has to be a kind of development in the way as National Statistical Organization in our nature of work, from only being providing official statistics to more also from the household surveys and other surveys to more managing such kind of information system in that perspective. So I'm heading, I mean, if we're talking about NSOs, my intervention and my message is to go more on really the modernization of National Statistical Organization in that perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ola. Great point. You made many useful points. I just want to bring up a couple of things, like you just said, to emphasize for further discussion. I think you raised at the beginning the issue of data access and data use, because ultimately this is where we see the real value. And so in the outline, this is one of the points which has been it's been spelled out, but obviously, I think there is an important point that needs to be. I mean, we take your point that we need to stress and emphasize. As you also raised the point of civil societies, how we bring in other stakeholders, but also I think the issue is also how statistical agency in their new role kind of can provide a support to civil society to make civil society data more rigorous from a statistical perspective. So I think there is you raise many points which have been highlighted in the report, but I think it emphasizes the need to go deeper into some of those points, and we will. So I will jump to the next. Thank you, Ola. Yeah, Thank you very much. And I will jump to the next discussant, Jack Gambino. So Jack, we actually never had the pleasure of meeting in person, so very nice meeting you. So can you please mute somebody who is not speaking? If you can mute. Jack, so Statistics Canada has been at the forefront in the innovation of household surveys, and also very recently, more recently, I mean, just there's a lot of work coming out of Statistics Canada in terms of use of household surveys in an integrated fashion with other data sources, how we use so clearly, again, those are points which emerge from the outline. But if you can give us your view on things that perhaps are missing in the outline, things that we should emphasize, things that perhaps could be the emphasis. But from a developed country perspective, like just how can we make these guidelines useful for both for a whole range of countries, but whether it's a developed countries or whether it's a developing countries or low capacity countries. So the floor is yours, Jack.
Thank you, Gerald. Yes, that's a good lead into my remarks on the paper. I'll be talking mostly about how what I see is missing or could be fleshed out in the outline, and how it relates to the longer document that will eventually be written. And I'll also try very hard to limit myself to 7 minutes. I knew I would like the document when I read in the very first paragraph, quote, "The need for household surveys is now greater than ever," end quote. Just a few years ago, some people, not statisticians, but some non-statisticians, gave the impression that big data would solve all our information problems and might even make surveys obsolete. Of course, that was far too unrealistic, and surveys are as important as ever, if not more. As I read further into the document, I found nothing that I disagreed with, but I did find that I would have emphasized some things more than others, and I would have added some additional ideas as well. I do realize, as I mentioned, that the document is an outline for a lengthier document, so perhaps some of the things I'll be saying in my remarks would have been covered in a longer document, but I'll go through the ideas anyway, just in case. So before giving specific comments on different sections of the document, I have one general comment, which is that the document doesn't really say enough about the challenges faced by NSOs when they try to implement such recommendations. In particular, I would have liked to have seen more mention of the fact that there are different challenges for different NSOs. So, for example, at the beginning of section 2, it says, quote, "Stronger and more responsive household survey systems will be needed," which of course is true. It's true for any country, in fact, but what it means for Statistics Sweden or Statistics Canada is very different from what it means for an NSO from a developing country. Obviously, the working group members are aware of this, but I thought it should be noted explicitly. Perhaps it could be in the longer version of the document. Moving on to specific comments, I won't go through every single section, obviously. I'll go through just a few of them, but I'll mention the section number so you'll know what I'm talking about when we look at this later. So moving on to specific comments on section 2.1.3, which is on data disaggregation, which was also discussed in the introductory remarks a few minutes ago. Of course, there is such a need, and there's a constant demand for such disaggregated data in Canada. I just want to mention that this has become an even bigger issue in Canada due to the way that COVID-19 has impacted different subpopulations differently. So measuring this differential impact is a major challenge, and Statistics Canada is working actively on this issue. Section 2.2.1 is on smarter sampling approaches. And the section mentions several approaches, which are all important approaches and very useful approaches, but they're not a panacea. So for example, in my experience, responsive design, or sometimes called adaptive design, certainly helps improve the data collection process, but the gains we've seen in practice are not dramatic. So I think that's worth keeping in mind. Moving on to section 2.2.2 on effective questionnaire and data collection design. This is a tremendous challenge, in particular, balancing questionnaire length, which is related to response burden, of course, balancing that with the need for detailed information from respondents is very difficult. The section mentions some approaches to deal with this challenge, such as, quote, leveraging survey to survey imputation to fill data gaps. I mentioned this particular approach because this is an example where there's some very nice theory developed to support these kinds of approaches of combining data in such a way. But practical success stories, in other words, real life experiences, are not quite as common. At least they weren't the last time I looked at this a couple of years ago. Moving on to section 2.3.1 on building sampling frames for phone and web surveys. It's all fine. I have no problem with what's written, but I think it's worth making a distinction between the different uses of such information. So what I have in mind is for example, if we're dealing with phone numbers or email addresses and so on, three possible uses. First, contacting people. Second, selecting people for a survey or for interviewing. And third, for actually collecting data. So there are at least three distinct uses for this, as I said, contacting, selecting, and collecting. And I thought it would be worth addressing these explicitly in the longer document. Section 2.3.4 is on mode effects. Well, as we all know, there's been lots of work done on mode effects, mostly country-specific work on this topic, but there are likely to be non-trivial differences between countries when it comes to mode effects. So it's good that the document, the outline document, stresses the importance of conducting additional experiments. Section 2.4 on integration of household surveys with other data sources. This is an important area that has seen some development, and I hope we'll see more development in the future. It's already been mentioned this morning, at least a couple of times. In my experience, which I do admit is limited, integrating data from different sources works well when the data for a person or a household are combined using traditional record linkage methods, but only moderately well when other methods are used. I'm thinking things like statistical matching. When you use statistical matching, of course, you will get a match, but for analytical purposes, the utility is not as great as we would have hoped in some cases. One important issue that is probably worth elaborating on in the longer document is the need for a legal framework that allows combining data from different sources. I could say more on that, but in the interest of time, I'll move on to my final point, which is on section 3.8. I was very happy to see the statement in that section on experimentation to establish empirical evidence within countries. The words within countries are important here because for certain issues, there will be differences between countries, among countries. In fact, not only will the results differ likely from country to country, but even the nature of the experiments that can be conducted will vary. For example, a test that is possible in one country may be a major challenge in another country because of differences in data collection infrastructure. So those are my comments. I was very happy with the document, but there's always room for further elaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for the very detailed comments. We might come back to you with some picking your brain on a couple of the points that you raised. Thank you. We're kind of running a bit late, so let's jump to James. James, are you there? I don't see you. James Mwongo. Yes, your 5 minutes, James. Good to hear your voice. James, just give us your, so there's been a lot of discussion on, yeah, there's a lot of the recommendation apply to every country, but there's also a recommendation that they're very country or regional specific. So from your standpoint, from where you sit, where do you think you see the document be most relevant, and particularly, for example, for a context like Africa? James?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to all of you. My name is James Mwonge. Thanks for the opportunity. I've listened in. I think this is an interesting paper. I just have a few comments. The first one is indeed true. COVID has brought a new dimension to data collection, but also maybe what we need to look at into the paper is given the new approaches of using phones and other methods in the context of developing countries where even phone coverage is less than 80%. I think the paper should probably try to bring out some of the limitations, but also the strength of using those approaches, because coverage is not 100%. The other comment I would like to make is, which has also been touched on, is the use of administrative data. In our context, we don't use so much of administrative data. And even the administrative data that is lacking in terms of quality. But here's a situation where we have to ensure that we link the household data to administrative data so that we can be able even to address the issues of disaggregation that has been alluded to. Because now, like in the context like Uganda, there are many more local governments that are being created, and each level of local government requires data. And so the challenge of household surveys that you cannot be able to provide information up to that level. So issues to link, how do we ensure that household surveys and administrative data are linked in such a way to inform the lower levels of lower local units that need this information. And the other aspect, which maybe I missed it, but I didn't see it, in the process, probably going forward, we have been constructing frames, sampling frame using population censuses. But in light of COVID, there are new variables that we have to actually capture to be able to allow us to collect more frequent subject-specific surveys. Now, I think the paper should try to capture some of this information, the kind of information that we need to consider including in censuses to allow us to generate frames for use in the circumstances such as what we are facing now. But extending it a little further is that in many developing countries, the partnership between the government, SASC offices, and the
Sorry, James, we lost you.
as well.
Sorry, James, we lost you. Can Can anybody hear James?
No.
James, sorry, we lost you. James, can you hear me? James, James, we lost you. We.
Is that
James, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, but we lost you for a while. So if you can please keep it kind of short, since we're gonna lose you again, probably. Please go ahead. James, sorry, we cannot hear you. James, we cannot hear you. We'll come back to you in a few minutes. Please stand by, and hopefully the line will get better. Yeah, James, we cannot hear you. James. Sorry. Unfortunately, I cannot tell James to stop because he cannot hear me. So I don't.
Howie, maybe
James, can you please contact James, and then we can go to the next discussant. James, can't hear you.
If we are to
James,
continue utilizing.
James, we cannot hear you. We're gonna mute you. We're gonna mute you and go to the next discussant, and we'll come back to you. Howie, can you mute James?
Oh.
So we can.
Yeah, I tried to somehow automatically unmute him. So.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, James. I think we'll have to. It's strange. Okay, James. We're gonna disconnect you and go to Sunita.
Hello.
Sorry, but we can have a call later. Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. It's okay.
James. Okay, so we're gonna go to Sunita now, and then maybe we'll come back to you, James.
It's okay.
So yeah, so this is one of the
It's okay.
Yeah, this is one of the recommendations in the report, strengthening ICT infrastructure in countries. So it's probably okay. Thank you, James. Sunita, let me jump to you very quickly. So I just want to kind of get your reaction on the paper. I'm very curious to hear your reaction on the paper, but also if I might add a little twist for you. So do you think a shared vision is possible? Do you think that is how feasible it is to have a shared vision on the household surveys? Sunita, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jero. First, I think the outline of the paper is really, it covers a lot of ground and covers many, many important issues. I think ultimately, it's all about the how of all of this, right? Of course, as you can imagine, for us at the Demographic and Health Surveys, much of the action items in the paper are really our bread and butter, including questions on how to improve methodologies for data collection, how to balance the policy and programmatic needs for data with the survey and questionnaire burden. And here I do want to comment that as more and more survey programs are able to actually produce data that the country trusts, we should have more of a sharing. At this point, very often for DHS, the burden increases tremendously because of the fact that these data, we do make these data available. It is very, in our history, I think it's not at all common that the data do not become publicly available. And that makes, that sort of sets a precedent that people want to keep adding to certain types of questionnaires. We do also do a lot in the areas of dissemination and capacity building, and of course, data use. And these are some of the areas, again, where there has to be much more of a shared vision. I do want to comment on some of the things against this context of, obviously similar challenges, because we are a data product, we assist countries in conducting these surveys as well as in using the data. Against this context, I have a few key areas that I think have not been fully touched on. And first, just a comment on the relevance of surveys. I don't think to this audience we need to make the case, but I do want to go into the fact that I do not believe that there is any situation in the foreseeable future, and definitely not by 2030, that surveys will not be central to meeting the data needs of countries. I say this not just because of all the reasons laid out in the paper, but also because of the fact that as long as inequalities exist, particularly in education and literacy, and in access to information and information tools, not just surveys, but face-to-face surveys will continue to be necessary. Without them, we will surely be unable to include the most vulnerable and marginalized populations. Additionally, I think a key part of the paper mentions the need to verify and prove self-reported survey findings. For health surveys in particular, biomarker collection and testing does exactly that. Self-reported health status can be checked with biomarker data collection. For this too, face-to-face surveys continue to be essential. The second issue I want to comment on is a discussion of alternatives to face-to-face surveys that's there in the paper. With the advent of the COVID era, there are plenty of examples of how quickly and effectively various survey platforms have been able to shift to online or cell phone data collection. However, in low and middle income countries, there is widespread acknowledgement that complex surveys, such as the DHS, with multiple modules, need face-to-face interaction. Additionally, not all surveys are made equal. And that's a point I really want to emphasize. We cannot generalize across all kinds of surveys and say the same tools will be effective. In fact, while some data can be effectively collected on cell phones or other remote means, we need special care for surveys that contain sensitive information. Can we? In fact, should we attempt to get data on, say, the experience of domestic violence from women over the phone? The phone may well be controlled by the very person who is abusing her. Some cell phone-based data, the research on it, seems to indicate that many women have their speakerphone on during phone interviews. So we need to be careful when we make these recommendations on the types of information that can be safely collected over the phone, for example. This leads me to my third point regarding PII security and confidentiality. There are many innovations proposed in the paper, all of which I agree with, and they need to be pursued. However, not too much attention has been paid to questions regarding confidentiality of information and the ethical collection of data. Here I refer not only to the work that the DHS and the World Bank have been doing together to find more efficient ways of displacing GPS locations to protect respondents and confidentiality, but also to the issue of how to safeguard other PII. While the collection of phone numbers and emails of respondents as part of a regular survey can indeed prove very useful, and we've seen that during the COVID era, the maintenance of this information runs counter to the need to anonymize the data so that respondent privacy is maintained. While this is relevant for all types of surveys, it is a particular challenge for surveys like the DHS that collect highly sensitive information, including on HIV status, sexual behavior, and violence. The data belong to the country, and there is a need for foolproof systems to be set up so that the telephone database cannot be used to violate respondent confidentiality. I think, it's the how that we've got to somehow figure out and work with countries so that we all have a common understanding of data confidentiality and the importance to the survival of surveys that we have this sort of protection. I'm almost out of time, but let me mention one last issue regarding the need for more research on tools to monitor and evaluate the quality of interviewer training and for survey data quality assessment. This is particularly relevant if we want to explore further the idea of linking surveys for complementary information. We must have ways to make quality assessments so that when we try to link surveys, we are linking apples and apples and not apple and rotten fruit. In this context, the collecting and mining of paradata, I believe, will prove to be one of the most important innovations in survey research. Developing machine learning algorithms that cut down on human monitoring of data quality as data are being collected holds the promise of not just improving data quality, but also doing it in a timely and potentially cost-effective way. Anyway, Jero, we can continue this conversation. I have a lot more that I could say, but I'm going to stop here.
Thank you. I knew that you had a lot more, and I love to, and we love to continue this conversation. My expectations were fully met. You had a lot of great comments, and we hope, as we have done already as part of the Intersecretarial Data Working Group, to continue working with DHS on also on work on finalizing the paper. Frauke. So as Sunita just said, so the devil is in the how. So there is a lot of points which are raised in the paper, a lot of bread and butter, as I say, improving methods. But now we want to hear from. I like to hear from you, given your past research, which has shown a great foresight on what the priorities should be. So what can you tell us about the document in general? But I would like to hear in particular, if you can focus on the innovation part, on the methodological part, particularly in light also of your research and future research.
Okay, yeah, happy to. I have to say, first of all, congratulations on taking this on. There have been many iterations of those kind of papers and documents, but using that momentum, I think you're right on to push that forward. And I really hope that you get all these great discussion comments in writing and use them. I for one, want to have a copy of them because there was really a lot of great points made. So this makes my life easy. I can really focus on a couple of pieces, as you mentioned, sort of highlighting what I've seen can work when you put it into practice and what might not work as well. I do want to reiterate the one thing that was said earlier from a colleague from Canada, that surveys have shown in the COVID-19 crisis or pandemic that they are a valuable tool. You know, they can measure something that might not yet be reflected in digital trace data or admin data, and sometimes you just need to hear how people are, and so that I think was demonstrated nicely. And so the field, as I can see it, was already prior to the pandemic leading to a point where the feeling was we need this to do this in conjunction of the data sources rather than all these meetings that we had, how can we replace them? And so I think we're in a very nice spot now. I want to point out for everyone on this call too that there was the special issue from survey methodology on how many surveys quickly adapted to the new situation. That because it's an open access journal, I thought that might be a useful resource, and I'll post the link in the chat here for everyone to see. I want to point out in terms of comments you made and how that could work. So the one thing that struck me was in section 2.1, you were talking about policy orientation and that we need to focus more on that. It reads a bit funny, be careful, because it sounds like it wasn't relevant so far, and I don't think that's true. But I think what I hear you say is that it's sort of the quick needs need to be met more, because otherwise they get driven to other data sources. And we have seen this a lot, also not just, I mean, my context is more sort of Germany and the US, but there too, we have seen that as well. And many of the data collections were changed in a format that allows sort of frequent, rapid assessment, shorter questionnaires, rotating panels, having, you know, asking people, you know, 4 or 5 times over the course of a year, enrolling them once and then keeping them going. I feel like that has worked well. I'm not sure if that can work everywhere, but I think it's worth experimenting in that direction a bit more. One thing though, if you move towards, I mean, if you meet this demand of rapid, you have a question, I give you data quickly, you know, for your policy decision. What we faced everywhere we've seen is the challenge on actually getting the reports out quickly enough, right? So as you build that, think of including an infrastructure piece, people, resources, skills, whatever have you, to crank out these reports differently and faster than we are used to. Maybe automate some of it if you can, and think ahead. It has been the bottleneck both on that global COVID symptom survey for us. It has been the bottleneck on the local surveys in Germany. We have way more data than we were able to sort of spit out the results. I think the Statistics Netherlands attempt to sort of turn their office into a press room was a great foresight on doing that in this direction. So, you know, something to keep in mind. Section 2.14, data access. What we've done with the Coleridge initiative is sort of similar to what you described there, right? Getting a platform cloud-based where agencies have access. We have seen countries try to do that and fail. My assessment is that it can work when you really tie it directly to a data analytics product that the agencies that provide the data then can use, and maybe tie it into the training of those agency folks. So my recommendation as you write about this, think through how this whole process should work and what really incentivizes people. Otherwise you get, you know, it's such a disconnect, and then the data sits somewhere and people are not using them properly. And there too, my recommendation would be to start small, engage a few in a couple of countries, demonstrate it works, and then roll it out. You know, if you try to like get everybody in agreement, it's never going to happen. That's at least our experience that we had in the US in trying to get government agencies to comply. I read section 2.21 as sort of the idea of having more of an underlying benchmark survey, so that other smaller surveys that maybe use non-probability sampling methods can be compared against. You don't say it in those words, but these ideas float around also in many other contexts. But I think to the extent that you can achieve that you can pair up sort of the solid, you know, population well-covered database with some key survey items that then help you to do proper adjustments when you have data collections that are not probability based. That can be a quite useful approach. Love section 2.2 and following on all the questionnaire design things. A lot has been said on that. I do also want to stress the experiments to coordinate them across the different surveys so that you can learn from each other. We have done that at the IRB with success. So, you know, get people into a mindset and a habit to always include a little bit of a survey experimentation in their ongoing surveys, right? That way you can accumulate knowledge. And right now, you don't have to move everybody to a new mode. Start small, take a subsample, see how this works. There's so much to learn just trying this out. Yeah, I guess I mentioned the benchmark survey. In general, there's a lot of statistical technology out there now, or new methods on combining non-probability databases with probability data. And I think it would be helpful for your readership to sort of be pointed to that. Likewise, there is a lot of technological development that we haven't talked about that much yet, but on the issue of sort of linkage and privacy and the questions that came up in the Q&A. In case you haven't seen it, there's a new book, Linking Sensitive Data, from Peter Christen and colleagues that appeared with Springer this year. The privacy preserving techniques, both when you plan on adding the geotags and then doing the linkage with the I mean, the more you link, the easier it will be to de-identify the people, right? And no matter whether you have PI, eventually there are enough criteria. And if you turn your geocodes, because you can't share them, into something like lives, 3 kilometers of a hospital and that many, and then you can locate people because you have all the positions, and then you can look, right? And so you need other forms to share or communicate that information. And I think that this is sort of a corner of the literature that's really worth paying attention to, would be my recommendation here, and maybe highlighting that in the paper a bit more. I do think you mentioned the privacy issues, sort of the environment. I think it is helpful to talk about the legal pieces, and because there has been this, following GDPR, the General Protection Regulation from Europe, there has been this wave through the countries of doing similar privacy regulations. But it's important to note that in the EU at least, there's an increasing amount of discussion going on maybe that wasn't the smartest of all policies. I mean, it's great and it's good, it's better what we had, but it also has the risk of stifling innovation. It has certain risks, because for certain use, people are willing to share their data. And we see this now in the COVID pandemic, that, people are willing to share their health data for this purpose, more so, right? And we have done empirical studies that showed that. So, tailoring or paying attention to when policies are made or laws are made to the contextual integrity, that framework that Helen Nissenbaum from Cornell-Tech sort of propagates as a framework for thinking about privacy, I think is very important. And then, of course, I can't help it, right? I need to comment on the education recommendations that you make there. I fully agree that, you have that, I think, in section 2.1, or when you talk about the alternative data sources. But you talk then in the rest of the paper so much about new survey methodology. Don't forget that there too is continuing education needed, right? I mean, the basic knowledge on how to do surveys might not be enough. There just has been, as Jero said, a lot of development, and so taking advantage of these continuing education opportunities, short courses or online courses, they're popping up everywhere. We produced a lot of those in the international program in survey and data science, but also, as I think one of the other commentators mentioned, really think about the peer-to-peer learning. I do think that we have seen one thing in the pandemic, not just among the survey providers, but in general, when you watch how education has sort of changed, I think there's a lot we can do to just, accelerate our knowledge through peer learning. And I do like a lot that you emphasize the training over hiring of all these new people, because I do think that there can be a lot of cross training, and this knowledge that the survey folks have on quality of the data and data generating processes is key. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Frauke. Very insightful. Again, we will certainly continue picking your brain. So my apologies. I said at the beginning, I knew I was going to run over the allotted time. I'm hoping that we can stay 10 extra minutes to give a few minutes to Andres and to Rafael at the end to wrap up the session. So Andres, if you can please, I apologize. My apologies. If you can keep it short, so we can leave a couple of extra minutes for Rafael for some concluding remarks. Andres.
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, perfectly. Go ahead. Yes, yes, we can. So if you can just give us your regional perspective on how a document like this can be useful to your countries and what's missing.
Jero, he's on mute.
It keeps unmuting. It keeps my laptop decides that I've been talking too much, so it keeps unmuting me. So very quickly, Andres, like a couple of minutes, if you can give us your perspective on the document.
Yeah, sure. I think that the outline gives a useful and comprehensive overview of what we think about the household service in the next decade. It was a comprehensive approach to what we expect. If we can summarize in just one word the outline, it could be integration, and I want to refer to that word, integration, because in Latin America and the Caribbean, household surveys have failed to completely incorporate this external auxiliary information, for example, from censuses or administrative records and maybe other important statistical sources. And I think for that, for the region in Latin America and the Caribbean, this word should be central. I mean, this should be the key word for the next decade regarding household surveys. For example, if you take a look at this big concern in household surveys, that is the non-response. There is like a paradox here because it looks like the society demands for more data, but at the same time, respondents are more reluctant to answer interviews. So again, the word integration should be like the key or like the right way to solve or achieve these kind of problems. In Latin America and the Caribbean, for example, the pandemic brought many challenges and many changes in household surveys. And if there was an issue that we were concerned was non-response, for example. But however, these changes, for example, in many countries, the collection mode went quickly from face-to-face to telephone, and with a sampling based on area. But those changes maybe show us that it could be possible to integrate the household surveys with censuses, with administrative records, etc. For example, again, with regarding non-response, with declining response rates and these challenges of using, for example, RDD sampling, maybe collecting data from address base but maintaining the collection mode to telephone, it could be kept in the medium term. Maybe because we have experienced this quick and swift change, and of course, as Sumita said, it is not for all of the surveys and all of the topics, but maybe we can find that this kind of integration and this kind of change from face-to-face to CATI collection could be a good result. And if there is another topic that I want to emphasize here in the region that it is important is disaggregation. Household survey samples should be planned to represent the whole population as usual and major disaggregation. But however, the sampling designs in the near future and the sampling allocation or the sample allocation should be defined in such a way that in a second step, if you want, that sample can be combined with auxiliary information. And again, the keyword is integration. And maybe we can think the sample in this second step to serve as the main source data that integrated with censuses or administrative records, and through some smaller estimation approach could be used in order to get these specific estimates that because of the agenda, the 2030 agenda requires more disaggregated data. And I think that that again, the word integration summarizes very well what we expect for the next decade. I think that the other comments my colleagues also repeated that, so I just want to emphasize that that the word integration play a central role. And finally, I want to say that the regional commissions are here to support and assist countries, not only in the definition of sampling frames and sampling designs, etc., but also in computing, for example, or in feeding smaller estimation models, or in order to get this disaggregated data. And I think that that countries should be assisted by the regional advisors such as me and the division of statistics in the regional commissions. We are here to support these recommendations that are in the outline. Yeah, I think, Gerald, that's it for me.
Thank you, Andres, and again, apologies for rushing you through that. So I just want to give the final word, and I apologize also. There's been a lot of very useful questions in both on the YouTube channel and on WebEx. We will compile all those questions and try to address some of them and share with the participants. So again, my apologies to all the participants who have been sticking with us this long. But I just want to leave the last word. The word of wisdom is not going to come from me. It's going to come from Rafael Diaz de Medina, which is the director of the ILO Department of Statistics and former chair of the Intersecretariat Working Group. Rafael, if you can give us your final thoughts, not necessarily a summary, just your words of wisdom.
Thank you, Jero, and thank you, everybody. Well, probably everyone that has participated and in all the panelists and everything, we come to the same conclusion. We actually need many more household surveys and not less, which is good. Secondly, probably we are standing on a burning platform, and we know that the resources needed to do household surveys in the world are under threat, even under COVID-19. So, but we have seen that COVID-19 has shown that we have the possibility to adapt household surveys to be fit for purpose. But we also know how challenging that process can be for countries. And it's a pity that we lost our friend from Uganda, where we have been working actively. And we know that they have been struggling, but have been succeeding in turning quickly to this emergency mode. But I would like to take us away from this, I think, and from the document, but also from the words today with all the panelists, is that we have I would say, to focus on 3 words that are in the document. It's coordination, innovation, and advocacy. And when we talk of coordination, for us, I mean this at the various levels. Certainly, coordination among international agencies is something we need, and we have just heard about coordination also of different types of household surveys. We need to be concerned about it, and it's important. It's an important part of our mandate in the Intersecretarial Working Group on Household Surveys. But it's not only between agencies, it's also coordination within countries, within ministries, within multiple levels. And we have heard from Ola the efforts that you have had also in doing that, just to avoid duplication of efforts, lack of coherence, lack of consistency, suboptimal use of resources, and so on. So we know that countries have learned much about how to coordinate their household surveys. It's important to learn from this and to spread these good experiences for the benefit of all. The second one is innovation. We have talked about innovation here, and I think the COVID-19 has already shown us some of the ways we can innovate, for example, by updating modes of data collection, improving sample frames, ways of collecting. But we need to build on that, even if in the short term, there can be a need to revert to traditional approaches. In this, I fully support what Sunita has mentioned about the need for sensitive information to have face-to-face interviews, and we cannot give up everything because COVID has hampered that. So the proposed document, I think, points that they have is to a variety of innovations. We can target all towards the idea of making surveys more efficient in delivering high quality data. And I think granularity, what Andres mentioned about disaggregation, it's crucial. And I think this is where we have to focus our attention. And finally, the advocacy. It's finally, but it's one of the most important things. And I think the final work is, no matter how well statisticians we can do all our technical work, we often fall short of convincing others how important this work is. But in the case of household surveys, I think we have a clear risk that even those who recognize their use don't see them as a good investment, particularly in the tight budgetary environment that we have and with all the COVID-19 things. So in summary, I think the discussion that we have just had is timely, no less so because of the massive disruptions created by the COVID-19, but also because household surveys are increasingly necessary, but also increasingly under threat. We have the opportunity to improve them, and the risk that if we don't do that, they could become more rare, particularly in less developing countries where data gaps are huge, and we need that. So we need to take a longer view as the title of this in the next decade, but we also know how quickly we have to also react. So the next decade is appropriate as a way to give us a sense of the scale of the task ahead, but this doesn't mean that we have the luxury of time to act. I think we have a genuine sense of urgency in that, and I hope that the document that we have and we have discussed can act as a platform to focus our efforts. I just concluding, thank you. I think thank you for the Intersecretarial Working Group. Thank you for how she, as the coordinator, has done everything excellent, and the task force that have produced this document. It's very, very, I want to congratulate them and happy to support them. So we need to deliver on the promise that our mandate in the Secretary Working Group provides. And thank you, Jero, for your moderation.
Yeah. Thank you, Rafael. I just want to conclude by thanking everybody, thank the discussant, and all the intervention also on online. So just one word, if I can summarize, is how. I think, as Sunita said, so there is a lot of what in the document, and some of the things that we've been discussing for many, many years. So I think the challenge here is how to operationalize some of those recommendations. And what we have seen also that the operationalization of those recommendations will also depend on country context and country's situations. So I think that it will be something that I draw from also this discussion. It's like in a way, the document should bring out a little bit more kind of this heterogeneity across countries and the solutions for country, which might be somewhat different. So again, I want to thank everybody. Thanks for kind of staying with us 15 extra minutes, and you will hear from us. As I was saying, I put on the chat. We will compile all the comments that we received, all the questions, and we will try to address some of them, certainly in the document, but we will also answer some of those questions and circulate with you all. Thank you again. Thanks. I want to thank Aoi also for the great coordinating role that she has played, and I will stop there. Have a good day, a good evening, or a good night. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.